No untouchables on the Pelicans roster, according to a new report, but that doesn't mean it's a trade fire sale and Trey Murphy III is gone. Let's break down the big rumor and look at who's safe and who isn't. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Monday, tipping off a week's worth of shows, and we're going to have a lot to cover, including a massive statement, rumor. We'll break it all down. Is it a fire sale in New Orleans? Not so fast, my friend. We'll break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. We'll look at who's safe and who isn't safe and what to make of the latest report out there. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Let me know in the comments down below. Yeah, they're back. If you are an everydayer. So quickly before we get into the report, which comes from Kevin O'Connor over at Yahoo in his mock draft, if you're looking for Zion stuff, I did an extra show over the weekend, Friday evening for you. Go check that out. That has all the facts, everything you need to know about it. You know, going forward, it's just going to be updates with that situation with the lawsuit, and we'll have facts and updates there. But it's not something I want to spend a lot of time on the specifics of that scenario. We'll, of course, look at Zion a little bit later in the show here because he's not one of the safe people, I would say. And we'll explain what that means coming up a little bit later. So let's get into the report. And this comes from Kevin O'Connor of Yahoo in his latest mock draft. I'm going to read you what he says. Quote, "There are no untouchables in New Orleans. League sources said the Pelicans are gauging the market for everyone on their roster. They very well could end up keeping their core pieces. But it appears the Pelicans are looking into taking different paths this summer, depending on what opportunities become available." End quote. Now, he ends up giving them Con Knipple here in the draft, which I think makes a lot of sense. But that's not the interesting part from this, right? So a lot of people are taking this quote and running with it of, I saw the graphic had Trey Murphy on it from Clutch Points, or maybe it was Basketball Central and all that, where it's oh boy, Trey Murphy is someone teams want if he's being used in a graphic like this. I saw, I forget who it was, maybe it was FanDuel, it was the Mavs are the betting favorite to acquire Herb Jones. Don't worry. That is not what this report says at all. It does not say there is a fire sale here in New Orleans, because there isn't a fire sale. What this is saying is Joe Dumars is doing his job. That's what this report says. This team just came off one of the worst years they've ever had. You're dealing with more Zion, another Zion situation after he only played 30 games. When he says, Kevin O'Connor says, it appears the Pelicans are looking into taking different paths this summer, depending on what opportunities become available. That is smart and what they should be doing. Look, you don't, and I've said this on the show multiple times, you don't fire David Griffin and bring in Joe Dumars and pay him the money that you're paying him just to run it back. Just keep David Griffin if you wanted to keep building what you have here. He was the architect of it after all. But if you didn't like the way he was doing things, or if you want something different, you go in a different direction, right? It's really as simple as that. And so while I don't think Joe Dumars was brought in to completely overhaul everything and be all of these people are gone and all that, or I don't even think he was brought in only to get through to Zion Williamson. I'll talk more about that in the third segment. You bring him in to change some things, to just do things differently, to take a fresh approach. And You don't know what that, you shouldn't know what that approach is until you know who you're keeping and who you're not. So yeah, float everyone on your team and see what the return is. There's no harm in doing that. By the way, that's what all general managers, presidents of basketball operations, whatever lead basketball decision makers do. They all know the value of each player on their team, and they do that through some internal stuff, but also by talking to other people and being like, what would you trade? We're looking to move him. Are you willing to make an offer? That kind of stuff. You absolutely should be doing that. Look, you should know what the value for Trey Murphy III is. You should know what the value for Herb Jones is. Doesn't mean you have to do anything with it. I'll use an example that literally happened today. I was driving my 76 Corvette and going down Magazine Street, and someone parked to go grab a coffee in there, and someone asked me, he's like, you interested in selling that? Just asked out of the blue in the car that I'm driving. Not interested in selling it, but he wanted to buy it, I guess, and asked. I could have given him a price, even if that price was a ridiculous amount that it's not worth, let's say. And he could have been like, I'll pay it or I won't, right? But there was no harm in him asking, and I don't have a problem with him asking, in a sense, because of that. So if that's going to be the case, you do that at the NBA level too, right? Teams might be calling about Trey Murphy, and you're not just going to be like, don't even bother, we're hanging up the phone. You'd be like, yeah, tell me what you will offer for him. And then you know what that dude is worth. That's a very valuable piece of information to do that on everyone on your roster when, should anyone be safe? I think is a very valid thing to do. If Joe Dumars is coming in after not running a team for an extended period of time, right? He hasn't been a lead basketball decision maker in a decade. Kind of gauging the value of the players on the team in trades is one of the first things he should be doing. This report does not concern me at all. And if anything, it makes me feel better that Joe Dumars is doing exactly what he should be doing. And in this report, it says they very well could end up keeping their core pieces, right? At least this is them exploring paths. And I want them to do that. And then you have these, 8 paths in front of you, whatever it might be. Maybe it's more than that, right? And you choose the one that you think is best. But you need those paths to be clearly mapped out with all of the data possible so that you can make an informed decision. That's what this is saying. This is a great report. If you hear this, you should feel really good that Joe Dumars is on top of it, stepping in and ready to do whatever this team needs to do to get better, or maybe go through a rebuild too. But that is supposed to get you better in the long term. So I love seeing this. I absolutely love seeing this report out there because no, I don't think Trey Murphy is going to be traded, or Herb Jones, or even Yves Missi. Actually, let's talk about those three and the players that feel safe on this Pelicans team. Who doesn't look like they're going to get moved unless it's like a Godfather offer? Let's talk about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And when I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Those fees really, really add up. Now I'm cooking more at home. I'm budgeting smarter. I'm just saving more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. You want to buy a car in the future, save up for a home. Monarch Money is going to be able to help you do that. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board show. I've been listening daily. NBA draft expert Raphael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's keep talking about this rumor of no untouchables. Look, after all that, no one should be a lock to return. It might take a heck of an offer to pry somebody away from the team, though. But sure, no one's untouchable, but also no one's going to probably make the offer that you would require for a Herb Jones, for a Trey Murphy. And so let's get into who feels safe on this roster. So I mentioned three of them here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see it on the right here. I think Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and to a lesser extent, Yves Missi all feel pretty safe. Trey, is arguably, depending on what you do with Zion, more on him in the next segment, your number one guy going forward, a young guy that you feel you can build around that has grown every single year. I think they'd like to see him as a number one option and what he's capable of doing, and we haven't really fully seen that yet, at least not on a healthy team, and that's rather important. He also is cost controlled. He just signed an extension, and you don't need to worry about him wanting out or anything like that because you've got him under contract for 4 more years at a very reasonable number. His salary peaks in 2028-2029 at $31 million. That's it. Starts at 25 this year on his extension. Now, the everydayers know, as one of my dogs is whining in the background, my everydayers know that, the best time to trade a player is in the first year of his deal, of his extension. I've always said that. It is. That's when the value is going to probably be up there for the most part, but not always. And I think Trey's value is only going to go up. I think his value is only going to go up as the salary cap goes up, and this deal looks like even more of a steal for the New Orleans Pelicans, and as he grows into the type of player that we hope that he can be. So I think his value is going to go up. So if you don't trade him, it's certainly not going to go down at the very least. So if you don't trade him and you trade him a year, it's going to be the exact same value that he would have this season. I'm really not worried about things getting worse for Trey Murphy III when it comes to it. So with him, I think you can absolutely hold on to him for another year and then look to move him later if you want, if your rebuild stalls, but also to just try and build around him. The offer would be something like 4 first-round picks for Trey Murphy and a good young player. No one's going to pay that. He may as well be untouchable, even if someone did kind of make that Godfather offer. Yeah, I think the Pelicans would take it. Trey Murphy. Herb Jones is also in that discussion. He's extension eligible. I would like the Pelicans to find an extension that works for both him and the team and keep him around in the future. So Herb's contract looks pretty good, and he contributes, and he's shown flashes of what his potential could be on the offensive end. And the other thing is he likes being here. He's not looking to go to a big market. I think he likes still being in the South, being close to where he's from, and just kind of it being quieter here than it would be in other places where he can just focus on basketball and fishing, probably. I think Herb is super happy here and likes it. Now, he wants to win. Certainly probably wants to be healthy too, and there's concerns with that here in New Orleans. But overall, they might be able to deliver on that, situation for him. And they're, not going to just trade him to trade him. I've seen Daniel Gafford for Herb Jones, and that ain't happening. That's the Pelicans could use more center help, but you also have Missi who's young, and if you go through a rebuild, you don't need to do that. Now, if you go through a rebuild, Trey and Herb don't exactly fit, but I think you don't need to trade them this year whatsoever. So Herb, it's going to take a good bit to be able to trade for. And again, if someone came in and offered you 4 first-round picks for Herb Jones, you probably should take that. But here's the thing with this, right? When it comes to first-round picks in these type of players, you only need to move them if you think you're in danger of losing them in free agency or something like that. And Herb, if he's I'm not going to sign an extension, then you look to move him. But if he's under contract for 4 years, like Trey Murphy is, you're not at risk of losing him. So you don't need to do anything. So you could trade guys for first-round picks, but you hope those first-round picks become a Trey Murphy. You hope that one of those picks becomes a Herb Jones, right? So in that sense, no, it's not as needed to trade them. I always kind of find that wild. It's we traded him for this pick, and we hope it becomes that player. Just keep the player. The draft can be a crapshoot. So I don't think they're just, again, like I said, it's not going to be a fire sale. If someone comes in and massively wants to overpay, yeah, the Pelicans need to consider that. And that's where I think it becomes there's no untouchables. If this team made the conference finals last year, yeah, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones would be untouchable, right? So would a number of players where under no circumstances are they going to be traded because this team feels that they compete or can compete. However, that's not the case. So there are no untouchables if we're going by the report from Kevin O'Connor over at Yahoo. Behind Trey and Herb, I think Yves Missi could be a little bit safe. I think in the right deal, he could get moved. Would you trade him in a deal for Jarrett Allen? If the team wants to kind of go all in and be competitive next year, yeah, they could do something like that. I think Missi still has a very long way to grow to be, an elite center in the NBA. And so that concerns me a little bit, as a guy that, grew a lot and he was very impressive his rookie year. If you just want to make the leap to competitiveness right now, yeah, you need to get and upgrade your center spot. And maybe that means Missi on the bench if you do it another way, but you might need to include Missi in the trade. But I think you only do that if you're like, okay, we're going in, we're going to try and make the finals or at least the conference finals or a deep playoff run, which means we got to go get a guy like Jarrett Allen or someone else. Miles Turner's probably not available. So you'll include Missi in there, even if it's a little bit reluctantly. Another guy that I think is pretty safe is, this one's going to seem weird, DeJounte Murray. Because of the injury, I just don't see any team really trying to trade for him right now in that contract, at least until they see him come back and how he is capable of playing. And he'll be back. He's going to play well. Like, I'm really not worried. The guy didn't die, right? His leg isn't amputated here. And his career is not even close to over. So he'll be back. But I don't think he's someone that you could easily just trade right now because teams aren't going to want to do that. You would need to attach a lot, I think, with him to be able to make that work because of the injury. And so you need someone to take on that salary, not get the production. You're going to have to attach assets with that. And the final one I'll mention here that I think is like, in a different category than some of these other guys, and that's Jose Alvarado. Obviously the team loves him. He loves the team. There was a lot of interest in him. The Bucks were really interested in him at the trade deadline this past year, and I believe they offered some sort of pick for him. And the Pelicans said no. They wanted to keep Jose Alvarado. And not complaining here about that, but I don't think he's someone that they're going to be looking to just outright move. They will if the right offer comes in. He means a lot to this team. He's a very, very impactful player. There are some limitations to him just due to size and things like that, but he's played well. At times he feels the heart and soul of this team, and you need that just energy guy to kind of do what he does. And he, shot the three ball relatively well last year at 36%. You'd like that to be up a little bit, but he's shown he's capable of doing that. He can run point for you a little bit. He's a menace defensively, and you want guys like that. Just an energy guy who's on-off numbers prove it. He impacts winning. You don't just give that guy up for nothing. Again, if someone's like, we'll offer you a lottery pick for Jose Alvarado, which no team will do, yeah, you jump on that deal. But it would take something like that to pry him away from New Orleans. So he's not untouchable if we're going by like the letter of what was written, but it's also not likely. And again, it's not a fire sale here in New Orleans. So don't worry if you're seeing these things, right? Like, one thing I implore you not to do is bet on players and where they're going to end up. Look, I love FanDuel. I have the app. I use it often. Don't bet on that type of thing because they're just trying to entice action. There's nothing credible to Herb Jones going to the Dallas Mavericks. They're just kind of picking some teams at random when it comes to this. That makes sense. Herb Jones seems like the type of player that Nico Harrison would love because he's a defensive-oriented guy, and that was, the reason they traded away Luka Doncic. So those are who I think is safe. I don't think anyone else is safe. And even here, I don't think these guys are 1,000% safe. Just more safe than not, I guess is what we'll say here. So coming up next, does that mean Zion could get moved? And there's some complications with that too. But what about CJ and others? Let's get into most likely to get moved, all of that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And for your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Tyler Shuck, is he going to be the starting QB? Is it Spencer Rattler? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints breaking down every single thing black and gold. We actually did hang out and grab some drinks on Friday. We ran into an everyday, one of the spots we were at, when he said hi to me and was like, oh, you actually do hang out with Ross? Like, I promise I do. We're very good friends, actually. He's officiating my wedding, along with Sharif Ishak of WDSU. So, yes, make Locked On Saints your second listen today. So we just went over who's safe. There's a couple notable names that I left out. And let's start with the one you're curious about, Zion Williamson. You know, a number of years ago when some of the off-court drama started to bubble up, I said, this is the type of thing that makes me feel like the team's just not going to like this. They want to kind of move on. They showed him support back then, publicly, actually. But I think that was public support and not necessarily like fully behind it if things kept going on, and things have kept going on. And he's just missed a lot of games. You know, the Pelicans can waive him by July 15th and only pay him about a little under $8 million of his contract. That might be worth doing, and it's probably something that they're debating after the most recent situation, even if all that gets dropped or whatever, right? And nothing comes from it, or even if Zion countersues. And go listen to that show if you want like the specific details on that. I'm not passing judgment either way when it comes to this. But I think they're tired of the distractions. I think they're tired of your number one guy not being someone you can rely on. And that's all factual here. And so I don't think he's safe at all, whether it's a trade, whether it's they just might waive him. And I think you're going to start to see some momentum building towards that. I'm not saying they're going to do either of those things, but it's a situation where that's much more on the table, I think, now than it's ever been before. If Zion was playing 70 games per year, you deal with all this stuff. He's not. Even though he played the best basketball of his career last year, it was 30 games, right? I traded him away in our Locked On NBA mock draft, which we're redoing because we don't kind of want this to be like the centerpiece of the story around it. But this is very much a thing that is exhausting to the team, and they just don't want to deal with this anymore. And I completely understand it. So that's something that means he's not safe at all. So whether it's a trade, whether it's just waiving him, I think that's something that they are going to absolutely explore to see, you know, maybe he has value around the league and you trade him. Maybe he doesn't and you just waive him. You need to at least know that, right? You need to know if he has value or not before you cut him from the roster. But I don't think he's safe at all at this point in time. Again, he's probably more likely to start for the team on opening night than not, barring an injury, right? But you never know. Let's keep going and look down the rest of the roster with some of the guys. We don't need to say like everybody here, right? Like Elfrid Payton is probably not safe, at least not on the current contract. They might waive him and bring him back, but not at what he's getting paid right now. You know, CJ McCollum, he's an expiring deal. You could look to extend him. But if you extend him, it's got to be much cheaper than the $30 million you're paying him. And it just doesn't feel like he'll take that kind of pay cut to remain here in New Orleans necessarily. And so if that's the case, you're going to look to move him and just get something in return for him. I think that $30 million contract makes it a little bit difficult to trade. I don't think that's a positive asset around the league. I don't necessarily think it's negative either, but it's not great. But you're going to look to move him if the right deal comes through, or even at the trade deadline if it turns out you don't have any sort of extension discussion with him, or he's not going to resign or whatever you're trying to offer. And the Pelicans books are not particularly great, right? I've gone over that. Give that show a listen if you haven't already. You know, you look to move him. He's certainly not safe, right? Kelly Olynyk's the other big expiring contract on the team. He's certainly not going to be a guy that is safe in the, you know, on this team at all as an expiring deal and an elder kind of statesman, right? He has the same amount of experience as CJ McCollum does. They're the same age, right? And while his contract's cheaper, sure, you could keep him and let it expire. Like, this isn't a long-term piece. And if someone's like, we want Kelly Olynyk, here you go, right? Brandon Boston Jr., a very similar situation where he doesn't feel particularly safe. He's under contract, but you could waive him to clear some room. I think you probably keep him just because he's cheap, but if you have to throw him in a deal as salary filler, yeah, you'll absolutely do that. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is, a free agent right now. The two-way guys are the two-way guys. None of them, I would say, really looked good enough to be yeah, it's going to be a Jose Alvarado kind of situation where they'll help with the team. So you get down to some of the really young guys here, and none of them feel safe to me. Carlo Makovic, I think he shows, promise, but is going to take a little while to kind of grow into the player that you want him to be. But given he's $2 million, maybe he's safe from that. But also, if you need to include him in a trade just to get a deal done, you don't question that whatsoever, and you throw him in. Same thing with Antonio Reeves, who I'm higher on than I think a lot of other people, and he showed a lot of potential and I think can be a really good off-ball scorer, movement kind of based guy. I'd like to keep him, but if a team's like, we want Antonio Reeves, you include Antonio Reeves in that trade, basically no questions asked. And then that leads us to Jordan Hawkins here. He has not had a great start to his NBA career, in my opinion. Injuries last year really limited him, and that back injury that he dealt with all year is concerning to me. And I wonder if there's something more to it. Now, that's speculation, so don't jump into that too much. But that does concern me at least a little bit. But this is someone who's supposed to be a really elite shooter. He shot 33% from three. Again, last year he wasn't healthy. Year before that was 36.6, so that's not bad, but it's not an elite or really great number either. And he just doesn't provide enough of anything else. He can jump high. He can dunk better than you think, and he grabs rebounds every now and then better than you think, but he's not a particularly good rebounder, whether it's offensive or defensive, and you could use him being a good defensive rebounder, but that's just not who he is. He's a shooter. And if he's not going to shoot more than 40, above 38%, that is a problem in my opinion here. So you need him to be more than he's been, and he just isn't. So I think you include him. Now, when you look at his salary, right, and what he's making, he's on his rookie scale deal. He's going to make $4.7 million this year, and then it jumps up to $7 million next season in the final year of it. That's not ideal for what he's been giving you. Now, those final years on those rookie deals are always kind of like a big jump up. So, you could also decline that. You could figure out what to do with him, but he doesn't feel safe. You'll include him in a trade if you've got to include him in a trade. Basically, everyone other than Trey, Herb, and maybe Misi, to a lesser extent, Jose Alvarado and Murray because of the injury, it's not a fire sale. You've got to make the right offers for these players. You're not going to just swipe them away from New Orleans and be like, we got to steal. But they're available for the right price. And I even think the people we said are safe are available for the right price. And that's how it should be after the season that you just went through, when the direction of your franchise is a little bit up in the air right now. Like I said, I'm not concerned about that no untouchables report because it means Joe Dumars is doing his job, and that's what we want. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with y'all tomorrow. Maybe we'll have news to talk about. We'll see.